Welcome to Miami Lead, a podcast dedicated to equipping leaders to face today's challenges with courage, faith, and innovation. This series is designed for anyone wanting to grow as a leader. Each episode offers insights, strategies, and inspiration from some of Miami's most influential minds. Our goal is to help you lead with purpose, build meaningful connections, and have a lasting impact on your community. We're glad you're here, because everybody wins when a leader gets better. And now, Pastor Bill White.
I'm so excited to welcome you to Miami Lead today to hear Odilon Almeida and learn from some of his expertise and experience across the years. You may have seen, well, here's something that you and I have known each other 10 years now, or maybe 11. You brought that to my attention this morning. I can't believe that has gone by so quickly. But I have to ask this question right on the front end because Jose Diaz, who's overseeing our business and finance here at the church, said that you have a professional athletic piece of your past. Could you tell us about that athleticism that so impressed Jose Diaz as we begin?
Thank you for your contribution, Jose. Appreciate that. And thank you for coming. I don't take it for granted, so thank you for coming. And I started my career in volleyball when I was 8 years old. And I ended when I was 19. At 14 years old, I became a professional, and it paid for all my education and everything.
Look at that.
In Brazil, and in the last 2 years, I was part of the national team in Brazil.
From Brazil?
For Brazil. Then after that, I didn't have the height. And I noticed that in the third year when I was not called for the national team. And I thought I better do something else. I was already doing engineering by that time. During the whole day and then training during the night. And then I stopped my career and ended my career in volleyball and continued the engineering.
I want to hit the pause button just for a second there because, I mean, for an Argentinian to commend a Brazilian for athletic skill and professionalism.
You know, I love Jose, as you know, and I come from a point that nobody's perfect, right? So.
Anyway, our guest today, Odilon Almeida. You probably saw in the promotional material his outstanding track record of international business, acquisition, of restoration, of integration of new business, and then acceleration to help them not only survive but thrive. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But I wonder if you would just help us to get to know you a bit from your professional story. I mean, the other thing I wanted to ask about that volleyball was because the initiative that you showed, the self-starting initiative to then kick your life into gear, and then out of that athleticism, pay for your own education and that higher education, and then when the opportunity came, then that was how it started. So you've been at this type of self-management motivation for a while.
Yeah, sport has a lot to do with that. I mean, all that time going professional in sports, I mean, that helps you with that. I would say tenacity and so forth, right? But yes?
Yeah, I wanted to say, so that led into this career with Colgate-Palmolive, with Coca-Cola here in America, with Western Union, where then you became a global president in hemispheric leadership, and then HCI worldwide, and then I guess now you are managing principal at AJ Holdings Company. Yeah. And so could you just give us a little sketch about how did that happen?
No, I love engineering. And
From volleyball to...
Yeah. And I love, after volleyball was engineering, and I love engineering. And I ended engineering and I joined Shell in Brazil before Colgate-Palmolive. And they have this thing called job rotation, and they sent me to marketing after 1 year, and they said, they've got to be crazy. You know, engineering, marketing. And then I got in love with marketing. And then I said, I better learn marketing. And to learn marketing, it would not be in Shell. It needs to be in a consumer packaging goods company where marketing was taught. I mean, the best schools of marketing were there. And then I joined Colgate-Palmolive as a manager, as a deodorant manager by that time. And I did my MBA during the night, during 2.5 years in business with specialization in marketing. And then I got the classical career. When I was 25 years old, they expatriated me to Canada, Toronto, and I was the youngest ever in Colgate to be expatriated by that time. And then I worked in Canada for 2 years, managing detergents. Then they sent me to New York, managing oral care in Asia. And it was a blast, because I would work 15 days in New York, 15 days in Asia during 2 years when I was 25, 26 years old. So you guys can imagine. It was great, great life. And then Colgate-Palmolive bought a local company, the market leader in oral care, and they asked me to go back to Brazil. Did that, left Colgate to join Coca-Cola. They were hiring like 11 guys around the globe to make a turnaround in marketing with a GM background. And I was the one in Latin America they hired. And so I moved to Rio de Janeiro by that time. I was the head of marketing and then the head of operations for Coca-Cola. Then they called me to Atlanta to be chief of staff for Latin America, reporting to the president of Latin America. And that was a tremendous time, Bill, because I think the older guys here with me, they remember Roberto Gozueta, the CEO of Coca-Cola. And by that time were the two guys, Roberto Gozueta, the CEO of Coca-Cola, and Jack Welch from GE. Those were the two guys in corporate America, and the office of Gozueta was 4 offices from mine, and I heard him so many times. Wow. And I saw his. He passed it when I was there, and the new CEO came on board, Ivester, which was a disaster, and I saw that also, and that really helped shape me on the CEO job, seeing that kind of transition and that kind of expertise that Gozueta had. Then Coca-Cola wanted me to go to Mexico. My son was born, Gabriel, that is here today, and I was born in Atlanta. And we want him to grow close to the grandparents, and we want to go back to Brazil. I was in a party in New York, and I got to know the COO of Bank Boston. He was a Brazilian, Henrique Meirelles, that became also finance minister in Brazil later. And he invited me to join the bank, Bank Boston, as chief marketing officer. And I don't know anything about financial services. And I told him, I don't know anything about this. And he told me, that's okay. But if you don't learn in 18 months, they're going to eat you alive. So you better learn banking. He put me with a consultant at my home every Saturday from 8 to 5 p.m. Every Saturday for 18 months. He would fly from Rio to São Paulo and teach me banking, everything related to banking. After 18 months, I changed careers and I became a banker. And now I was like managing all the internet business and all the digital business that was being born for Bank Boston. Fast forward, Bank Boston is sold to Bank of America. And by another thing is Brian Moynihan, the current CEO of Bank of America, was my boss by that time at Bank Boston, so a close friend. And by that time, digital was being born. And when they sold the business, I need to go and work for Bank of America, Itaú. I didn't want to do that. And I left and joined Western Union. I started as regional vice president of Southern, Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, Chile, Bolivia, South America. And then we grew the business from $50 million to $900 million, half through acquisitions, half through organic by that time. And then they invited me to manage Americas. We had a monitor from FinCEN because of a compliance issue in the United States by that time. And they want me in the United States. I don't want to go to Denver. And that's a fun story. I want to go to New York, but my son and my wife wanted to come to Miami, and I lost it 2-1. And I came to Miami. And I was blessed to come to Miami because I love it now. And we put our operation here in Miami. And by that time, we turned around the United States. The United States was going down by 10%. I have this monitor by my side. Fast forward 2 years, monitor out. The company was clean, and the business was growing 10%. Then I got Europe, I got Asia, I got Africa, the rest of the world. We started our digital business that we drove from 0 to $700 million in 5 years. And then after doing all of that in 2019, I was the ready now successor of the CEO of Western Union.
Western Union.
Yeah, and by that time, the CEO, he's a great friend of mine, Henrique Meirelles, he came to me and said, I'm going to stay 3 years more. And we were the same age, and I want to be CEO of a public company in the United States. So I left Western Union in tears because I love the company, and I joined ACI Worldwide, the CEO, president, and board director. I was already board director of Millicom. Probably you guys going to Latin America know the brand Tigo, which is the second telecom operator in Latin America, and I was a board director already for 8-9 years. So I got that experience, and I became the CEO of ACI Worldwide. And by the end of 2012, after 3 years, we turned around the company, have never grown. First year we grew 6%, and then accelerated to 9%, expand margin by 400 basis points. Investors were happy. We got an activist in the middle of it. The activist made a lot of money. He's happy also. Everybody was happy. And by the end of 2012, I left the company, and I start my business now in another phase. It's called AJ Holding School, where I do seed money and Series A. And I'm also operating partner of Advent International, which is a global private equity, where I do late-stage investments with them, always in technology, fintech, and banking. And I'm now also a member of a few companies, a member of the board of 5 companies. So that's where.
So like this is like, if you're wondering why we asked him to speak today, there's something in there somewhere that might be answering your question, because this is more than simply a travelogue on his personal success story. What I'm asking you to think through as you hear him is that in our environment, in Miami especially, we've got international business central. So that seems very relevant to where most of us are connected in some point. And then another thing that I'm thinking, maybe you're on the front end of your career or your investment and trying to figure out how am I going to do what I'm going to do. Where you end may not have a lot to do with where you started, but I'm seeing a marketing thread that ran throughout. And so staying tuned to those. And then the other thought I'm having is just, we're calling this a lunch and learn. A lunch and learn. And what I have heard him do at every level and every stage of every intersection was, I got to learn something I don't know yet. I got to keep learning. There's something for me to learn here. And then as he built his knowledge, and this is just my listening interpretation to your story right now, is that we're here to learn how to take leadership to the next level. Miami Lead, we want to be a skill invitation through the actual experiential knowledge that comes from being there, being in the trenches, and then learning to rise to the next, how to bounce back in those times. And you said sometimes it went down, sometimes it went up. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But I just wanted to frame a little bit of what the story we just heard. I don't know where you're connecting today, at the front end, in the middle, on a downside, on an up, or I don't know what I don't know yet. AI is a whole other learning that you're connected to. And so just the commitment to learn is one thing that I think you model for us in your life that would be something that we can take encouragement from today.
If I may, every person that I coach, every employee or anyone that I can talk to, I say the same thing. I say, your career is too important for you to delegate to someone else. You better manage your career.
That's a quotable.
And the way that you manage your career is, number one, the career is going to happen in steps. It's not linear. It is steps. And from one step to the other, that happens in one moment to the other. And the buzz will pass, and you got to be ready. And that's the learning part. So you've got to be learning all the time, so when the bus passes, you can get in, and you are in the best position to get in.
Let me ask this, because sometimes those changes are very intimidating.
Yes.
And the flood of the tidal wave of so much right now, and so when you say, well, how do I be ready for that? How do you get ready for a tidal wave? So that when it comes, then somehow you're learning how to surf to your next destination.
I think number one is be ready. To be ready, you need to be consistent with your values. And that's for the long term, right? So I have my values that I'm very consistent with. So everybody knows what to expect from me. And that's important, because if you're consistent with the values, that talks in the long run.
Consistent with the values.
Consistent with your values, and do what you say, right? Consistent with your values. Do what you are.
Talk.
Consistent with your values. So that's number one. And number two is learn all the time. Learning is so hard. I'm 62 years old, so you can imagine. It's so hard to learn, but you need to be learning all the time. So any experience that you have, you need to debrief. And another thing that I notice is managers are very good on debriefing failure, but they don't have the same discipline to debrief success. And sometimes you have more opportunity on a success than on a failure. So every time in a board or any position that I am, and everybody has a great result, my first question is why? Why this great result? Because we're not expecting that. What went different than you? So I try to debrief success with the same discipline that we debrief failure. And that brings a lot of learning.
Would you say, and I'm sure that the attitude of learning and then the culture of learning led to your rise, but what would you say if somebody's at a certain level and wants to rise to the next level, or like you said, hey, I always wanted to be a CEO of a public company or my own company, then how do you rise in the ranks to keep rising in that dream?
That's a great question. And I have an answer to that because it's very clear in my mind. And I would hope that I would have learned that earlier in my life, but I didn't. I learned when I was like 40 years old. And I call it genuine care, which is if you really care about people around you, that shows. That shows. And that makes a difference because not everybody does that. And it's wonderful. That also goes with my faith. So that works. And because it is who I am. So I think having genuine care, not about you only and your family, but about all your stakeholders and the ones that are involved with you, that makes a difference and brings consistency and brings an atmosphere around you of people that want to help you. So I think that works all the sides.
Okay, let me just feed that back to you a little bit, because what I heard you say was if you care about people, they know it.
Genuine
If
care.
it's real, they know it.
Right.
And then that engenders a kind of trust that then makes them, that last statement you said was?
It creates an atmosphere around you that help you along
that
the
they
way.
come to help you.
Along the way.
So they care about you back, and then when an opening comes or a door is there, then they say, hey, maybe Odilon.
I probably heard that from a sermon from you or some
Did
place.
you?
Yeah, but I'm just replicating.
I doubt that. You were at this long before we got together. So, speaking of staying relevant and current in change, and then how you build your workforce for a new work environment, I heard a report this week that 50% of our workforce is still working from home, even though the tech companies are trying their dead level best to get people to come back live in person. That's just one of the shifts that has taken place. How do you guide employees to embrace the shift, or do you have any response to the benefits of live in-person work versus the digital piece of this? Any comment you want to make concerning any of that?
The first comment is I'm with my tennis shoes. And that is true since COVID-19. I will never be with my tennis shoes.
One of our young leaders complimented you on your shoes before. I wanted to know where they came from.
And I will never be with my tennis shoes before COVID-19. And Carolina, my best daughter here today, she told me that, and today, that I was not using tennis shoes probably before COVID-19. And I will never come with a T-shirt before COVID-19, and I will use my tie. So, and women in heels, right? I mean, before COVID-19, after COVID-19, different. And that is happening all around. That changed the world. It did change the world. That changed the relationship between working from home or not. For example, at ACI Worldwide, I had 32% of the sales force before COVID-19 remotely in some way, partially remote. After COVID-19, 65%, two-thirds, that would go to the office 3 times a week. You may like it. He may say, I like it, I don't like it. Who cares? It is what it is now. And this hybrid came to stay. And I think workforce will need to adapt to that, and the bosses will need to adapt to that. So it's going to be partially at the office, partially at home, and that will continue, I think. And has good and bad in everything, as everything in life, right?
And then what about AI?
Yeah, AI,
It's a disruptor.
It's a tremendous disruptor. But Bill, what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about trends by the end, and then I'm
Okay.
going to go back to
Okay,
AI.
Great. Let's hold that for a little
Yeah,
bit.
hold a little bit, because I want to leave you with a message about AI today.
Then I want to move to this one, because one of the things I know about you and our relationship has been built is the faith that we both share. And yet some of the people that may be joining us later on podcast or in the room today, that may be something that they have thought about, but maybe haven't leaned into. How does that work for you in light of this international business success and all the change management and the caring about people and the constant learning curve that you're embracing, even though it's not easy to learn, but you want. So how does your faith intersect in your business life?
I'm going to be very practical about that, if I may. Values, your values define who you are. And you're going to act according to your values. So if you're doing something that is against a value that you believe you have, you probably don't have that value. Because if you would have that value, you would be behaving accordingly, because that's what we do. We behave according to the values we are. And values come from two places: for our beliefs, for our world model, as you just said before, for our beliefs, and for the experiences we had. So our beliefs and the experiences we have had will shape your values. And that's where faith comes on me, because that's what I believe. Mm-hmm. And then you add to that the experiences I had, and that's who I am. So I think my belief is an intrinsic thing that what I have. It's not an extrinsic thing that I carry by the side. My belief is what I am. And that's why Christianism is so important for me.
One of the most poignant demonstrations of that I experienced with you personally, and I asked you earlier if I could ask you this, but was when we walked together through the valley of the shadow of death with your wife, Layla.
Yeah.
Can you bring us into that journey a bit? Because even for the most consummate professionals, sometimes we're forced to deal with life and death and what now, and circumstances that happened that. How did your faith guide you at a time like that?
It was the hardest moment of my life. And I remember when she passed in my arms and my home. And I called some friends, and they were traveling. One was Jose, and he was in Colorado, I think. And then and they didn't call you, but you went to talk to Layla 1 week before.
Right.
Because I think she was saying ciao, bye to you. Not to me, because I was not ready to accept. And she also called Sydney by that time, and you talked to him, you and Sydney, which is
our pastor friend from Brazil.
From Brazil. And then you were at my home 30 minutes after that happened, because Jose called you and you were there. And you helped me through that. It was the hardest event of my life for I think 8 months. For 8 months was terrible. And I never lived something like that, depression and everything else. Yeah. And I was the CEO of a public company. So very hard moment of my life. And then after 8 months, as a miracle, everything changed. I woke up one morning and it was different. And I want to live again, and it was amazing. And it was a miracle, I think.
What would you credit that to? How did you experience?
I cannot have any, it's not rational. There's no event that create that change. It just happened, and I stopped all the medicine in that day. And not that I was totally recovered. I'm still in transition. Yeah. But now I'm talking to people that are losing their best ones, and I can help.
Yeah.
And I think that my faith and Layla's faith and Gabriel's faith only got stronger in that moment, right?
Yeah. You grew up in the home of a pastor. Yes. Your mother was a pastor.
Yes.
Did you find yourself at any point hearing her voice giving you guidance as to?
In some way, but I was reading Job all day long, right, as you can imagine. And my conversation with God is, you have tested me, in the worst way possible. So there's nothing else now.
For those that are perhaps new to the Bible or new to the story of Job is one of the most challenging, desperately devastating stories in the Bible.
Yes.
And you said you were reading that every day during that time period.
Yeah, yeah. So I think my faith, I don't think I know, my faith became stronger,
And
not weaker.
you found God in the midst of
I
the
found
devastation.
God there, and he took me out, basically, and took my son out. So, yeah,
Amen.
very significant.
Well, thank you for sharing that
Oh,
with
my
us.
pleasure.
If we can just shift back maybe now to the future.
Yes.
You're still learning. You're still watching the trends. You're still figuring out what's coming next. Would you tell us? I don't know that there's a crystal ball or the tea leaves that you look at, but what's on the horizon, and how do we get ready for that?
First
what
of
do you
all, it's so hard to have a crystal ball on that thing, right? I mean, knowing what's going to happen. But I'm so happy I'm part of a think tank today that is really thinking about what's going to happen in the next decades. And there is one thing that I think you should live today with, I think would be this, would be those three major trends that we see in this task force. And I'm not talking about, I could talk about this year, Republican, Democrat, or what's my opinion, so forth. And my opinion is we're going to have a soft landing, and inflation is going to be more resilient than we expect. Interest will take more time to go down, but the scenario is positive, and the economic scenario is going to be very much equal with a Democrat or a Republican in the government.
We'll have you back after the election,
Yes.
and we'll find out what your prediction.
And if it is right, I will probably be rich. So you guys, but let's see how it goes. But I think it is very predictable, the short term, I would say. The long term is very hard. But we see three trends in the world, and I think that's the most important message today. Sorry that I have my back here. And this is the most important message today. What are these three big trends that I see? Not I only, but this group that I'm part of. And the first one, you have been touching that in every sermon, because you are very consistent with the trend. And the trend is called individualism. And that is a trend that came to stay for the next decades. And why individualism is staying? Because there is not enough growth in the world. So it's a sum zero thing. And when that happens, everybody looks at itself, himself. So countries looking at itself, people looking my part, groups of people looking at the ones that are with me, not the ones that are not against me. So that I call individualism. And that will continue to cause conflicts. So I don't think that conflicts will get better. One war may end, another one will start, because it's going to be disputing everything that you can dispute. Countries are going to look inside more than outside. So Democrats and Republicans, it's all protectionism now. And it's happening in every country.
Protectionism, you said?
Protectionism. And it's happening in every country, and it will continue to happen because now there's not enough growth. What is that different than the past? If you go back and think about after the Second War, everything was devastated, and it was very easy to gain productivity on that stage. And productivity generates growth. So economically wise, you have like 20, 30 years of prosperity after the World War. And then the wall of Berlin went down, and then you have another event for prosperity and for productivity, because you have all of that population not making money, not participating in consumption, and accepting to work for much less. And that's called productivity. So you get all of that get in. That is over in 2005, 2010. And then everything you get the crisis of 2005, 2008, and the world becomes very tight. And we are living that tightness now, it's getting worse. And then you see the polarization, the groups, and you have the East now thinking decades and the next 10 years, and you get the West thinking the next 4 years or 8 years. So it's very hard to compete with that kind of culture, and that will continue, that polarization. So individualism is the first one, and that's bad for the world. That's not good. That means that the world will lose productivity with the time, Because when the countries close, then what you do is you create pockets of development, and then the world does not prosper as much as it could if everybody was working in one direction only. And that will happen and continue to happen. That's a negative trend. You have another trend that is also negative, which is population is growing older, and birth rates are decreasing. And that will continue. So there's going to be a moment that the population, global population, is going to start to go down. You can already project that. If the rate continues to be the same, you can already project that by year X, the population is going to go down. And worst of all, the ones here are going to get older. So you have less people producing at the same level of productivity, fewer paying for more, and that's, again, very negative trend. You put those negative trends together. I'm going to get positive in 2 seconds, so stay with me. Stay with me. But you put those two trends together, and this American dream of my next generation is going to do better than I do is challenged. So our kids, our grandkids, will not be positioned to do better than we do if we think only about those two things. They will be positioned to do worse.
So what's the third trend?
And then comes the third trend, which can change everything, which is generative AI. And that can change the dynamic of the other two. And I will relate generative AI, and I will explain to you why, but I will relate generative AI to the same revolution that we have, and you can write in the Bible that when people stop traveling and park in a place and start to farm and to grow cattle, grow sheep, and produce their own food. So food was not a problem anymore. And that moment, probably, I was not there. I'm old, but I was not there. And in that moment, most probably, everybody inside of that thought, oh, this is very scary. And it was scary, because the wars start in that moment, right? Because everybody wants the land. And then you have so many examples in the Bible, right? I want this land. I go and I battle, I take them out, and it was all about land. And tribes in the West and so forth, I think. And that was scary. But that took the world to another level, because food was not a problem anymore. You don't wake up and not knowing if you would eat that day or not. So that was the first revolution. Then you get the second revolution, which was the Industrial Revolution. That also changed the world. And it was scary. I'm going to lose my job. There are robots all around. Then came robots after that. I'm going to lose my job. It's going to change the world. And has so many negative trends to that. One negative trend is climate. The positive thing is transportation is not an issue anymore. You can get a car, you can get a plane, you can get a ship, but check the weather. Check the quality of the air. So we have lots of negatives, but again, that brought the world to another level. Now you go to Japan and you can schedule that. I'm going to Japan. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. There's a company manufacturing planes. There is a company leasing planes, and there is you buying the tickets, and your ticket is guaranteed. All of that is Industrial Revolution.
We're going to have to call our time.
Yeah.
Odilon.
So I'm going to just end. I'm just going to end with that. So when you get generative AI, that is the same thing of those two trends. I was 2 seconds only. I was with in California with a robot with a female form, and I started to interact with her last week with Carol. And I asked her, "Do you speak Portuguese?" And she told me, "No. Can teach me one word?" And I said, when we're in Portuguese, I say, yeah, how do you say hi in Portuguese? She asked me. And I said, olá. In 2 seconds, she repeated what I said without an accent. And then I asked her, now you know to speak, you can speak Portuguese. She said, no. But if you take me to a trip to Brazil, don't ask me how she knew about Brazil, I can learn. That robot learns 100% what you say to her, 100%, and keep 100% for 10 years, for 100 years. We can't. And that will change the world. And it's going to come something that I learned from my son yesterday, which is called general AI, which is when the machines start to do things that we cannot do. It's scary, but it is wonderful, because that will change the world. And that's what the line that I would like to leave with.
Thank you so much, Odilon. Fascinating. Thank you for being with us. Shall we say thank you to Odilon?
Thanks for listening to this episode of Miami Lead. Colossians 3:23 says, "Do everything as for the Lord." No matter your position, God wants you to lead in a way that honors Him. If you enjoyed the conversation, remember to follow the channel and turn on the notifications so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to be a part of our live audience for future recordings, head over to miamilead.org to learn more and register. We'd love to see you there. Remember, everybody wins when a leader gets better.